There was a company called Abrio RMS Group.
It was a small IP video surveillance system company. They installed turnkey systems for metropolitan entities like police departments, traffic departments, mainly focused on law enforcement. And they were a small company struggling for a very long time. And for some reason, the president had done a project with Ellie and decided, it was a DBR project, and decided that critical chain was close to what he had done before and that he should try it again. So of course he had everyone in the company read the critical chain, and nothing much happened with it. No one kind of took it and ran with it. So somehow Danny finds out about this company. Danny talks to me. I go and talk to them, and this turns into a full-time deal. Our main customer, like I said, was police departments. And I have a nice video clip that kind of gives you the demeanor of the kind of people we deal with. But for us to have a good relationship with a police department, any police department, they need two things. One is they need video where they want video, right? You can't monitor everything, so someone has to decide what I want to see on my video screen, right? For two reasons. Well, do I need to send more police there? What's happening there? Just for practical, everyday viewing. The other reason is that if something does happen, I want to be able to save it and give it to the prosecutor and be able to use it in court to deal with whatever the issue was, right? Now, on the other hand, they also want to save cost. They have a budget. They work for a city. What are the city budgets doing these days? They're not going up in most cases. It's to our advantage because putting cameras is a lot more efficient and practical in a lot of ways than hiring more policemen. So it works. But for us to maintain that good relationship, the system has to work. It has to be up. You can't have a camera standing there, like unfortunately one time happened. Someone was shot under a camera, and we found out later that the camera wasn't connected to power yet and nothing was recorded. This causes a big headache for everybody. If you can see this, this is a typical monitoring station. You see them on TV, you see them in the movies. This is what they're looking at from a control room. They can pan, tilt, zoom cameras that are attached there. They can swap out views, they can record from there. Even in some cases, there's audio that's connected between the two. But this is what they want to see. And for a police officer or the chief or whoever expects 4K high-def video there all the time. And of course, we're constrained like anybody else. They have a budget. We can't give them infinite number of cameras. We have to do with what the budget we have. And of course, when do they want them? They want them now, right? They want them yesterday, or at least as quickly as possible. I don't usually do this, but earlier this week or last week, up in a parish just north of Lafayette, there was a video clip, and the lieutenant, sheriff, used a video in a pretty unique way. I thought it was pretty funny. Maybe you'll think it's funny too, but it gives you a way to see how they're using the video and the kind of things that they expect to get from it.
On Wednesday night, July the 8th, Stelly's Market and Restaurant on Highway 71 was broken into and burglarized. The thief smashed the front glass with a large rock, kicked in the office door, and made off with hundreds of dollars in cash. Watch as a man commits his crime. Look at him close. The hooded jacket he's wearing is camouflage. He appears to be light-skinned or white, and he looks to be around 6 foot tall and thin. Watch how he walks, with sort of a lanky gait. Stelly's has been a local favorite for decades. The family works hard and is known to be generous. Always with a kind word for friend or stranger, the Stelly family represents Southern hospitality at its best. If you're the man that committed this felony, look at me, son. I'm talking to you. The sheriff likes Stelly's restaurant, and so do I. The food here is good, and the folks are friendly. We're going to identify you, arrest you, and put you in a small cell. After that, I'm going to have a cheeseburger here with fries and a Coke and leave a nice tip for the waitress. Meanwhile, your next meal will be served through a small hole in a cell door. Because our detectives harvested DNA from the rock you used and you left a perfect boot print on the door you kicked in. But we won't have to wait on lab results because you're on St. Landry Crime Stoppers tonight. Congratulations, son. I'm about to make you famous. By tomorrow, 100,000 people will have watched you commit a felony. You will be recognized. And the people that know you don't really like you anyway. So when it comes down to a choice between you and $1,000, they'll take the cash. On behalf of Crime Stoppers, I'm Lieutenant Higgins.
If you have any information on this crime, call Crime Stoppers at 948-TIPS. You could earn up to a $1,000 cash reward.
The system usually involves some kind of camera mounted on a pole. And inside the camera, like I said, is a very high-powered camera. There is a Wi-Fi and 4G router, power supply, fans, switches, Ethernet equipment, everything you need other than power, which is attached at the base of the pole, to be able to transmit from just about anywhere. On any installation, we don't just have the equipment, but we have the engineer that's working on the project, the affiliates that are doing the work that we need. Sometimes the street department has to be involved. Sometimes the police have to be involved to help us block the traffic so we can do the work. There's a lot of coordination just to install the cameras. The next batch of cameras for the city of Dallas, for example, are 80 cameras. This is a typical batch of cameras that cities order. So it's not just one or two, quite a few. We have engineers in all kinds of weather out in the field, able to leap tall buildings and not necessarily get over them. We work in holding areas in Marshall's office. This is on top of the largest building in Pittsburgh. And again, these aren't necessarily small systems, but they can spread from a lot of different places where any one of these red marks that you see can be a group of cameras. The connections you see between the red marks are that backhaul kind of capability to kind of direct the camera traffic back to, I think in this case, there is a monitoring station there. There's also a monitoring station at Park Manor, for example. It has to come back to some point. Not every location or every camera gets its own viewing room. All right, so there's computers, work centers, video walls, all that kind of capability. It has to be part of that system. Microwave links. What do you think our project performance was before we started this transition? Pretty consistent. No project finished on time, right? Every customer was pissed off. Every one of those customers was pissed off. And they have guns. Sometimes more than one. And the process that they were using to manage the projects was with a nice tool called Excel. There was a list of projects in the A column, a list of engineers that were leading the project in the B column. Every Monday morning, everybody got on the phone, and the engineer that was responsible for the project on the top talked about their project, where they were, next, down the list. This took at least 2 hours. After lunch, this was a total irrelevant list of priorities, and everything had changed by then, and it's as if we didn't have the meeting at all, which not bad enough. But we almost had 2 or 3 of those kind of meetings each week. We definitely had another meeting that next Monday. Do you imagine that the priorities were the same from week to week? Not at all. So every week, priorities we started all over. It was really based on who was screaming the loudest. It turns out that they just want it done as quickly as possible, and if we can give them a date and say it'll be done by then, they go, fine. Even if that date is far longer than they want, they at least have a date. But under these situations, these dates just come and go. Promises are made and broken. And you can imagine the performance of the company and the performance of the people is not the most congenial. All right, because everyone's looking out for their own project. So what did we do? Well, I took it on as a challenge. Other things like implementing new policies, one of them is building correct networks. Building the backbone, there's details, there's adding the skeletons, resourcing, just like Danny took us through building the network earlier this week. Again, nothing special, nothing unique. It's all there. It's all part of Exepron. They understood it, they were given assignments, they did some things differently each week. And basically the result was this standard process for any new PO that comes in the door. We assign a project manager, they get all the paperwork, they are now fully responsible and they have full authority to do the project. They don't have to blame someone, they can't come to me and bail them out. The engineer is that person that is responsible and has full authority to do that work. It wasn't like that before. Too much finger pointing, right? We have a group of sales and pre-sales engineers that usually go to a site, survey the site, and they may or may not be the engineer that's on the project. So we have to have some kind of handoff between the two. Update any existing documentation, and if we do need information that we didn't get before, then we schedule another on-site survey to basically go with police officer again and double check a few things. We build a costed bill of materials. We make sure that we have all the parts that we need. We need to know what our costs are going to be. We need to know if we need affiliates or subcontractors to do part of the work, so we know there are the resources to include. And only then do we build a preliminary project plan. This is an internal project plan with the people that are within the company at this point. What we found was that police don't sit well and try to help build project plans with you. They like to criticize, they like to voice their own opinion, they like to do these things. So we used that energy, once we had the project plan in place, to conduct a kickoff meeting. Kickoff meeting is usually 2-3 hour meeting, depending on the size of the project, where we go through the proposal one more time, we go through the bill of material one more time, we go and actually walk the site for certain things that we hadn't seen before. We bring up the preliminary project plan in Exepron and we say, look, here's where we are, here's what the plan looks like, and here are the estimated delivery time frames. We don't give a date. We say, look, if everything goes according to plan, what's the best we can do? Right in the green zone, right? And we go, well, of course, nothing ever goes according to plan, ha ha ha. It could be as long as the end of the red. Not once did anybody complain about that answer about when will you finish. It's good enough. It's fine. I understand. No problem. So, did I have to explain critical chain yet? Or what the buffer was? Or why the blue lines? Or here's our plan. They made adjustments, they voiced their opinion, they said, well, what about this? And even while the engineer was explaining, I could be on the screen making adjustments and then bringing it up and scheduling it on the spot and having the latest based on what happened right 5 minutes ago and show them what their plan looks like. They want to make an adjustment, we make an adjustment, put the new task in, change this around, new plan. It's beautiful. And before we leave the meeting, we have a plan everyone agrees to. We're not doing it all together at once, we're doing it kind of in 2 phases, but we finalize the schedule at that point. We're checking for full kit things internally, if we have capacity, material, and synchronizing the project. Just because we have a project plan doesn't mean we start it right away, right? We put it in the pipeline. Do we show them the load and show them all the blah, blah? No. We schedule it. There it is. That's when we're going to start. So again, 90% of the time, if we tell them what the date is going to be, we're going to start, when we're going to finish, it's good enough. But you darn well better hit it at that point. On the suggested start date, start the project schedule, maintain the status and the updates. Usually customers want some kind of weekly conference call, go through updates. The night before, we'll create an email with kind of some highlights of what happened since last week, attach the latest task aging and buffer status report, put it in an email, send it out, and that's our agenda for our morning meeting. And then at some point we finish, submit the final invoice. We're almost done. In this case, we usually have some kind of support group that takes over the maintenance and support of that system. So there is a handoff between our delivery group and the support group at some point once the project is over, so they have all the documentation and can add it to that city's reference bank of information about their project, so we can maintain support. Now, support can be done all remote, mostly, unless there's been some catastrophic event to the equipment or whatever, but usually we can remote into the servers. The cameras you saw are 4G cameras, which we can dive into from the network. You know the screen, but I want to point out a few things. Remember, I didn't talk a lot about what we did with the engineers. Right? I talked a lot about what we did with the executives to get us to this point in the first place. But it took, when I first started, probably 2, maybe 3 weeks of taking their proposals and putting project plans in Exepron. And that was over the phone, here and there. It wasn't even a full-time thing over the 2 to 3 weeks. But what I did before we started was that they were included as a project manager. I had some projects running here already, and I brought up this screen. Wherever they were, they brought up that screen. And I said, look, this is the dashboard we're going to use to manage our projects. I explained to them what early warning meant. What did I use? Well, easy. It's kind of like, I use the analogy that if you leave the house at a certain time to make a flight, you know, whatever that time is, you got plenty of time to get there. No matter what the traffic, no matter what happens along the way. If you leave early enough, you should make your flight just fine. Well, you also know that at some point, you're going to cut it close. Hopefully nothing goes wrong. And you'll still make your flight. You might have to rush here and there, but that means you're in the red zone. You also know there's a point at which you leave the house, you will not make your flight. This is what it means to be in the black. A miracle has to happen. You still may make your flight, but you are in deep trouble here because you left too late, no matter how smooth things go. This is how I describe the early warning. I say, here's the portfolio status. You'll see it has 2 axes, one across the bottom and one across the top, and one says critical chain complete. I said, have you heard of critical path? Most people say, sure. And even if they don't say sure, I say critical path is nothing more than the longest chain of task dependencies, right? That makes sense. One task follows another, and that's how long things should take. Critical chain, what's critical chain? Well, now we're including the resources. It's the longest chain of task and resource dependencies. Why? Because we don't have infinite resources. We have to take resources into account, right? We know we only have so many of you. And as we go do updates, then you'll see the black dot move across from 0 to 100% of how long where the project is along the critical chain. Done. Oh, by the way, what's the buffer? You know the little exercise where you ask someone for a task estimate and, you know, play along. And I say, Kathy, how long is this task going to take? You say, 10 days. Right. And I wink at the guy and I go, you know, you've probably done this task once or twice, maybe you didn't. And I'll accept your answer of 10 days, but look at the effect this is going to have if we use that estimate in the project plan. I'm going to get 10 days from you, I'm going to get 10 days from you, I'm going to get 10 days from you. Even though you know if you did that task, it's nowhere near 10 days. Why are you giving me an estimate of 10 days? Well, I have 20 other projects to do. I have emergencies, I have support work, the VP is telling me things to do. I have to take this into account, right? Murphy, all the other things. Okay, I understand, okay. But if I use the 10 days, does this help us get projects done any faster? No. So can we find a way to use something less than 10 days? Okay, that's a start. Now, I tell them I'm not blind to all the other things that are going on, and we'll deal with all the other projects you're focused on. I'll help you deal with why you're telling me 10 days. Murphy does happen, uncertainty does happen. But instead of using it in the task, we're going to put it at the end of the project. Why put it at the end of the project, they say? Well, what's more important, finishing each task on time or finishing the project on time? Well, of course, finishing the project on time. Now, what if you were going to report your progress on this 10-day task, and you found out that the task only took 3 days to do? Are you going to tell me you were done early? What's the chance? No, probably not. Because next time you ask me to do the same thing, you're going to say, oh, you told me 10 last time? Sorry, I'm not going to accept it. You're screwed, right? You can't tell me that you're going to finish early. And if I give you 2 weeks, what are you going to do between now and then for those 10 days, even when you know it's a 3-day task? You're not going to start on it right away. You can't, because you have 20 other things to do. And when do you wait to do it? 3 days before. Do you finish on time anyway? Of course not, because Murphy happens. All right, so did that help us at all get our projects done any faster by using 10 days as an estimate for tasks? No. So why are we doing it? Don't know. That's what is the buffer. We're going to put that protection at the end of the project and use that to help us protect ourselves to the due date. And here's what I want when I ask for an estimate. Ken, when I ask for an estimate, give me an aggressive but doable duration. That's all I want. Now, if it's 3 days and Ken says 4, he says 5, do I argue? No. It's still better than 10, right? There's no reason to argue. I use 3 days, I use 4 days, I use 5 days, or whatever. But that's what I say about the buffer. That's it. And the rest is pretty straightforward. Name, there's the early warning, status, start date, due date. That's our screen. That's our main screen. That's the screen I tell them that I use to look at all the projects. At any one time, we're looking at maybe 10, 15 projects at once on that screen. There's some in pipeline that you don't see. But that's a typical view of our dashboard. Here's also a very well-known screen. Again, I point it out because there are some things different here. There's a lot of same information, but on this screen I'm telling them this early warning and that project status relates directly to your project. Same kind of information, the actual buffer status, and here is your prioritized task list. You see your resources, you see yourself in this resource screen and next to a task, then it's time for you to work on that task. I tell them if you see tasks that are in here, you got to do something about it now. You see resources that are someone else outside the company, and you're responsible for this project, you better inform them that they have a task coming up that requires their help. And then there's the tasks that they need to do this week, the next week, the week after, and the ones that don't have any predecessors that can start anytime. You want to start a task that doesn't have a predecessor and you have time to do it? Fine. If you don't, fine. Here's the results. The blue is the planned duration of the project once it was scheduled. The red is the actual duration. These were generated within the first month of our implementations. We couldn't really say how much better we did because we never kept track of it before. But the consensus was that even the planned dates were better than what they had been doing before. Why? Because any other project had never finished anyway, so they were already way long. On time, same project, 70% of them finished on time. 30% did not. We still had some improvement to do. And the reason for the late 30% was mainly because they had irritated so many suppliers and had so many payables issues with suppliers that we had a difficult time overcoming that, and the lateness was due to not being able to get the materials we needed to deliver the project. We eventually did, but it took some time. That was the hardest thing to do. Some people didn't like the new environment. They liked being the firefighters. One person left exactly for that reason. We replaced them, of course. And since then, our resources have been stable. We're hiring our first person in 2 weeks that we've hired since the beginning of this project. One person. I think a year into the implementation, we finally got our financial results for the year. Sales were only up 12%. Operating expenses were only down 25%. And net profits were only up 50. as good as it sounds, it was also very attractive to our friends that I showed you at the beginning of the slide. And these two situations came together, and the owner sold to Hitachi, and from September of last year, we were officially a Hitachi company. This division in the US is only $6 billion. They also expected another ability of our division. Because what are we as project managers really? If we're telling people we can deliver projects on a certain date, or projects will take a certain amount of time, aren't we doing things like with a crystal ball? Aren't we predicting the future or attempting to predict the future? We do, don't we? Now the problem is human beings are not very good at predicting the future. We don't live in an environment where predicting things is very easy. And for me, if I didn't have this tool to be able to predict when projects would finish or how long a project would take, I wouldn't be standing here. Now, the thing with Hitachi is that they not only expect the same kind of performance, well, mainly because our customers are now used to this kind of performance, damn it. They also expect us to predict revenue a quarter or two or three ahead of time. So we've added that element, or at least Hitachi has imposed to us that element. And we have to report our predicted revenue each week and keep them updated on whatever their executives want to hear. And the numbers I report go directly to the CEO of a $6 billion company. Can I be wrong? Can I be a little bit off? Not very often. Well, I'm glad to report, thank God, that the first quarter we achieved 153% of our target. We're on track for Q2, we're on track for Q3. Have we been able to do that in every case? No, of course not. But having that ability, at least having that frame of mind, has also continued to reduce the chaos, because now people don't think, well, oh my God, better be busy because that is the only alternative that I know, and that's what will help us get our numbers. Now look, do a good job. These guys are engineers, they have to think. There's a lot of cognitive things that have to happen. And rushing around and working 20-hour days and running around with the hair on fire is not the way to do good work. Consequently, our rework has gone down. Every one of our customers is happy. Most of them are giving us more work. We're adding to the system. They're interested in new things that Hitachi is doing, and we're able to go back into that police station or to whoever the public safety officer is, or the mayor of the town, or the police chief, and confidently tell them, look, you got this? Yes, great. We have the other things that we can build on. Things like fine-tuning our ability to deal with multitasking. It starts at a young age, yes. That's why it's so hard. But we've created a kind of a priority system within our group, because the only way that I can track load on any resources is if there's a project in Exepron, right? Now remember, these same engineers are also doing support work that can happen at any time. They're also being asked by the salespeople to go and survey a certain city. These are not projects. Well, they could be, but they're not. So my deal is I have to maintain a certain amount of protective capacity for those two other events. So everyone agrees that if there is a serious emergency and you need to go deal with it, your job is to deal with it. The camera cannot be down, right? This is the primary measurement of the system. It can't be down. Go take care of it, whatever the issue is. The second priority is if you have a task that needs attention now, that's your next priority. Otherwise, continue following the priority list. Now, in any case, whatever the situation is, whether it's an emergency, which is not so easy to do, but if there is a high priority task or there's a list of tasks that need to be done, or someone asks you to do, the other agreement we've made as a group is that you can say no. politely. Yes, I can't do it now, but I can get to it next week. Is that okay? Most of the time, that's fine too. Or I can say yes, and yes means I'll get it done now as efficiently and safely as possible. So this is a way to respond to things that will cause people to multitask. The people know that it's not just the responsibility of us when we stand here and say, please don't multitask. The receiver also has a responsibility in that equation to be able to decide how they want to react to that request. Yes, yes, but, or no. Now the other thing about multitasking is that what I can do is control when someone sees the PO. I see all the POs when they come in. Now, when I'm ready to engage, whoever the engineer is that's assigned to that project, then I'll tell them here it is. I'll ask for our internal tracking numbers. We'll set up a time to discuss it and go through the proposal and put in the project plan. Project plan, the preliminary one, gets entered and we schedule it and we say, well, look, it's going to finish in this range. Is that good enough? Yes. Okay. We might start it at that point, or we might pipeline it in such a way that it starts a week from now, a month from now. Again, when do we need it in terms of financial results? Well, even though our VP says we need to start it now, we at least have a good story to say that no, we don't have to start it now. Please don't make me start it now. So what I've turned into is not a manager or a project manager or a PMO person that is telling people what to do. They already know what to do. We schedule a project, there it is what to do, right? And when? Why do I need to explain to them what to do? What have I turned into? Someone that tells people what not to do. You're doing things other than what's on the list or what sales has given you or the emergencies that support has asked you to take care of. You're doing something more than that? Why? How come? Look at all the things we're already doing, starting with the end in mind. We're planning things out, we're executing, we're using buffers. Here's what needs to be done. It gave me, and it gives the rest of our folks enough time, because in the midst of everything that I've explained to you since Hitachi has bought us, we've developed new cameras, new gateways to connect cameras to existing servers, new technologies like license plate readers or shot spotter technology or facial recognition, different ways of transmitting the video from one point to another. Hitachi has provided us with servers and storage devices. There's also this virtualization suite, so on one screen, any browser can view any camera in Washington, D.C., any license plate reader, any 911 calls, any gunshots. We can layer in traffic patterns, we can layer in weather patterns, we can layer in facial recognition, we can layer in CAD drawings so we can see inside of buildings. And now not only are police interested in this kind of technology, but anybody else that wants to see what's going on their property or in their assets. Hitachi, being a little bit bigger, has asked us to also develop solutions for all these other ones as well. Each one of these is definitely, any one new project in any one of these is already bigger than our existing staff. Maybe next year I'll explain that we've done more of these projects, and not only are we asked to do them in the United States, but now we have a quote with a small offshore oil platform. They have a framework, they call it a framework, for 10,000 cameras. Our biggest implementation right now is only 600. What do I have to do? I have to find more capacity everywhere. And again, the good thing about Hitachi is they will provide training. They have training academies, and the people that are doing the projects now will become basically full-fledged project managers, or will need to be, doing what I'm doing for a portfolio of projects on their own portfolio of projects. This is our next leap, our next challenge. So that's the end of my story so far, without Danny and Tony's and John's help and the support of the community, knowing you guys are out there doing what you're doing, and the way that we're sharing things here, it's been a big help.